But gentlemen, hello, 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 hello. Testing, testing, testing. Now is the time for all good men. The first order of business this afternoon will be a replay of these tapes, including some released last night. We'll start with Tananarive after the docking maneuver where they're discussing the upcoming events, and go right on through the retro fire. I think is the last thing where we hear from Armstrong right after retro fire through Kano. I think it takes some 40 to 42 minutes in all, and there's some dead air in between, but not very much. So, Doyle Hodges, can you roll those tapes?
Gemini 8, Gemini.
Tananarive has LOS.
It might be helpful to have the identification of some of those flight controllers. The flight controller you heard, and I think we'll all agree, did a superb job on the coastal Centre Quebec, excuse me, is James Fucci, F-U-C-C-I, of the Manned Spacecraft Center, as are the other two, whose names I'll give you. The flight controller on the Rosenau Victor is Keith Kundell, K-U-N-D-E-L-L, and the Hawaii Capcom was Arda, first name Arda, A-R-D-A, Roy, R-O-Y. Bill, I think you wanted to run through some stuff on the Agena, huh?
Well, first, just a brief word. There will be a post-shift debriefing on the Agena. I'd like to just say at this point in time that it is all working properly. We have had one primary propulsion system burn, a short impulse burn, with a stored program command loaded maneuver, which did raise the apogee to some 220 miles. Yes, probably the second one has gone off by this time, which of course should have circularized it at 220, although I don't have any confirmation on that. The flight controllers will be here at 7 this evening to give you a detailed rundown. The other thing I'd like to mention at this point in time is that, as you are well aware, Captain Schirra and Frank Borman had been on a world tour, a goodwill tour, after the 7 and 6 mission. They were staying in Hawaii last night, a normal scheduled stop, and we have now taken steps to have Captain Schirra return to Okinawa with the 707 that they were on to pick up the Gemini 8 crew and to return them to the Cape. We expect that both Captain Schirra and the Mason, the destroyer which picked up the 8 crew and the capsule, to arrive in Okinawa about 5 o'clock this evening local time here in Houston, which is 2300 Zulu time. They will then return here to the States just as soon as possible and go directly to the Cape to begin the normal debriefing cycles. As I stated last night, on normal time for the debriefing cycles is some 9 days. We, of course, always reserve the right to extend that if need be, if we need more time for the debriefing sessions. The crew seems to be in fine shape. The last report that I had was this morning, where they were sleeping after having had a large dinner, breakfast, or what have you, of steak and eggs, and after having debriefed themselves and having gone through some medical checks. The crew is in good shape. The spacecraft itself will also be flown out of Okinawa. It will be flown out approximately a day later and will proceed from there to St. Louis, where it will go through the normal post-mission examination to evaluate how the components made out. To date, at this point in time, we're not much further along than we were last night when we talked to you. We have listened to the tapes just as you have, and we have not speculated. We do not have any indication as to what initiated the problem, and we are still awaiting the tape data and the spacecraft data to be returned here to Houston, where the engineers can analyze it and determine just what the sequence of events was and what caused it.
I'd like to say that we appreciate your forbearance in the release of the tapes. As we said last night, we believe that they would be released. Now they have been released. The additional time is accountable for in the fact that we included considerably more talk than just the air-to-ground passes, which we thought might be in your best interest, the flight controller crosstalk. I believe that's everything we have. If you have a question, Dick?
Paul, you had indicated last night, I think, that one of the reasons for not releasing the tape was a high voice level. Now, I didn't hear a high voice level on these tapes. What were you referring to?
If I said high, it was erroneous. I said the voice level was, I meant to say the voice level was important. You compare that with the heart rates that Chuck gave and certain other things.
Just to follow up, I didn't hear any indication in the voice level that would suggest that there was any strong emotion being displayed in the voice. Was that what you meant last night?
No, that's not what I meant, but if that's what you meant, that's perfectly all right with me.
I think we were quite pleased with the way that crew behaved, and I think you'll agree with me that they behaved quite phenomenally under a very a trying situation, and they'd be complimented for that.
Dan?
Bill, a quick go over here indicates that there was not a depletion of Ohm's fuel. Is that a correct, from going through this in a hurry, that you did have Ohm's fuel clear to the end?
We, at this point in time, have not seen the tapes. We've only heard the verbal reports, and as you can tell, some of the verbal reports are somewhat contradictory. We will reserve our judgment until we see the data just as to exactly what the configuration was. We can speculate if we wanted, which of course good engineers don't ever do. We could speculate if we wanted in various ways that this could happen. We're waiting till we see all of the data.
Ben?
Mr. Schneider, there's a mission rule that stipulates that if the RCS system is activated, the mission must be terminated shortly thereafter. Could you explain why does this mission rule exist?
That's because the reaction control system is necessary to stabilize the spacecraft during re-entry, and therefore whenever the reaction control system is activated, the mission rule states that re-entry must be considered.
Roy?
I have two questions, if I may. First, Paul, could you tell us with a little more accuracy what portions were deleted? I think really what I'm looking for is some reassurance that no sections pertinent to technical information were cut from the tapes that we've heard.
The point I wanted to make, absolutely nothing was deleted. In fact, we went the other route and added the flight controller to crosstalk between passes.
Right, and the second question I have is for Mr. Schneider. It's from Frank McGee in New York, who's been monitoring throughout. And Frank says there was some trouble, as they heard it there, in passing the command originally to execute the loaded yaw maneuver to the Agena spacecraft. And then as they heard it, there seemed to be some further concern, the crew being told that what to do, rather, if the command started the spacecraft maneuvering wildly. Finally, the trouble seems to have started when the recorder was turned on, and he wants to know, could this possibly have started the sequence of troublous events?
First, we don't know what started, nor do we have a good hack on what the time sequence was. So we only have that verbal report and are patiently awaiting data. As far as the instructions to the crew about overpowering the control system. This is also in the mission rules, and it's standard procedure, we consider it. The spacecraft has far more authority than the Agena and would be used normally if the Agena went wild.
The command that Jim mentioned is to deactivate the attitude control system in the Agena.
Would there be any possibility that the Agena activation command could have started the sequence of events?
We're completely not speculating as to what the causes might have been at this point in time. We have no data.
Mr. Snyder, the RKV did speculate that Neil might have sent a 4-1 instead of a 041 command, commanding a yaw instead of turning on the tape recorder. Do you have any further readout on that?
All of the data is en route, and we have no data other than what you heard here. You have now been brought completely up to date where we are.
Is that
nothing more than that?
Is there any validity to that speculation? Could he have done that?
I can't comment on that one way or another.
How many different ways are there to say we can't speculate? I'd like to enumerate them and simply punch them up. Yes, sir.
Mr. Snyder, could you give us some sort of itinerary for the crew? Do you know what time they'll reach the Cape, what time they'll reach here?
I'm afraid I don't. Our instructions or our request is that they return to the Cape just as soon as possible. We do not know exactly what the turnaround time for the aircraft will be out of Okinawa. However, they will try to expedite it and get the crew back there so that we can begin our normal debriefing sessions.
We would expect to have it by late this afternoon, say after 5 o'clock, if all these ETAs hold up. All right.
The air-to-ground conversation indicates that the pilot apparently thought there was at first some trouble with the RCS rather than the ohms, that he activated the 2 rings and couldn't get any response. At least he thought so. Is that the way you...
I think you've confused RCS with ACS. ACS is the automatic control system in the Agena, which is what he turned off first. His RCS is, as far as I understood the tape, which again is all the data we have, I believe worked properly all the way through.
Right here.
Mr. Snyder, we've heard a lot about the spacecraft being out of control. That was a phrase that was used a lot last night. It was out of control. Can you tell me what you mean about a spacecraft being out of control? Does that mean it's like a car that's going off the road without a driver at the wheel? Just what does it mean?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think, as the tapes said, it was gyrating wildly. We don't, at this point in time, have any indication of whether it was a roll, yaw, or pitch. We think it was primarily roll, but we're not sure just from listening to the tapes. And we believe it was rolling rather rapidly, as the astronaut did indicate. And when he said it was uncontrolled, it meant he was not able to overpower the roll using his onboard attitude stabilization system as he normally would.
Yes, sir.
We're not asking you to speculate on whether or not he made the wrong command, but had he made this command, the 4-1 instead of the other, would it have reacted in this manner that we saw?
I'm afraid we haven't analyzed anything like that. We would have to look at the tapes and see what command was sent in and then what its effect would be. I will say that the attitude control system of the Agena has 10-pound thrusters on it.
Jerry?
Paul, was this the voice of Armstrong or Scott or both on these tapes?
It's primarily Armstrong all the way. I don't recall hearing Scott at all. Martin?
These tapes started with a report from CSQ that Gemini 8 had been separated from the Agena rocket.
It's free, yeah.
When did you know that the Gemini 8 was in trouble prior to this, and was there a tape prior to this that we did not hear?
No, you heard the tape immediately prior to that, which was Tananarive, where they were docked. You heard Lovell discussing the commands, and if such and such happens, do this. And the first indication we had was when CSQ locked up. They had some trouble locking up on telemetry. And the first word, I think, is we show them free. Undocked, yeah.
We're apparently interpreting right when we get the statement that there was a stuck hand controller. That refers to the hand stick that Armstrong operates. That's one question. The second one is, it is true, isn't it, that 401 command is a yaw left command, and that 441 is an ACS on for the Gemini?
In answer to your first question, the astronaut speculated, as you heard on the tape, I may have a stuck hand controller, and again, when we look at the data, he may have had one at that time. We do know that the hand controller did work properly thereafter, particularly during re-entry. However, we can't speculate without seeing the data as to just what happened. We are not sure whether the problem was initiated in the Agena, in the spacecraft, or had something to do with the combination of the two, or was something entirely different. We have no data other than what you heard right there. Now, as far as what the command is, you've got me. I just plain do not know.
John Hodge this morning told us that it took roughly 30 minutes to get control of the spacecraft, yet the transcript here seems only to run for about half that time. Have we picked it up a little late at all?
No, I think before he leaves CSQ, he's saying that he's beginning to get a little authority back, but it was probably Hawaii before he got things damped out, and that's 30 minutes. Pete?
Coastal Sentry Quebec seems to have done yeoman duty. I understand it has a SYNCOM link, for instance. But between the time you had it at Coastal Sentry Quebec and went over to the coast station, there's a big gap in communications. The other day, Mr. Matthews said that a rescue capability had not been planned on, but that the astronauts had the benefit of the brains on the ground. There's a big gap in there. I'm wondering if you're reconsidering your deployment for the next time.
As Mr. Kraft said last night, something that I agree with completely, we think we had excellent pre-planning. As a matter of fact, our contingency planning here actually affected a recovery that was probably closer and more nominal than our normal recovery. So we think our planning was very good.
Yes, sir.
At one point, the crew was told if the ACS on the Agena goes wild to send command 400 to turn it off. I was just wondering how they were using the word wild at that time. Were they anticipating anything of this nature?
I think I can answer that by saying we always anticipate every problem that we can conceive of, and it was only in that sense.
Yes, sir.
Supplementary on that. I made a note of this. If the Agena goes wild, send in the signal code 400, but I don't see it on the transcript. That's why I asked if we picked up the transcript a little late.
It's Tananarive.
Oh, you've got a page, haven't you got?
It's Tananarive where that starts, where that particular sequence is. Roy?
Since the NASA rules forbid any speculation, thereby prohibiting pretty much any release of information this afternoon, could either of you gentlemen give us some idea of the decisions that led to calling a news conference today rather than just releasing the tapes?
Well, one, there is no rule prohibiting the release of information. As a matter of fact, the rule is quite the opposite. You just have received every bit of information that we have. Good engineers don't speculate unless they have data. I am a good engineer, I think, and I refuse to speculate until I know. If you recall, back in October when we had the Agena problem, there was a lot of speculation the Agena blew up. Now, if you recall, that was an effect, not a cause. And just as you have heard a lot of things here, Any one of them could be an effect and not the cause, and we wish to determine what the cause is before we point fingers at anything.
Well, our problem seems to be, Mr. Schneider, that we can't even get in many cases, a cause from an effect. That seems to be the gist of the question.
Well, right at this point in time, we can't even correlate what the time sequence of, so you will have to forgive us, and you'll just have to be patient and give us time. I think we have shown you that given time to analyze, we do determine what the problem is, and then we do make it completely public and do tell you exactly what the trouble is. We don't think that we should speculate. It would do none of us any good.
Steve? Mr. Schneider, you did have a little bit of extra information in a tape dump over Hawaii, and you did have, from your test pilots, an indication that the ohms control, the attitude maneuvering control in the spacecraft was back on at about 10 minutes to 8 local. Does this not give you some pretty good grounds to speculate that either there was something wrong with the readout on the ground of that ohms control or the readout in the spacecraft?
Not at all. Almost innumerable things could have happened. The astronauts could have changed the configuration of the spacecraft. Some short could have opened up. Again, here I am speculating when I say I don't want to speculate. It brings us to conclude that there was something that changed, and that's about all I can say right now.
Will this change in any way the plans for GT9?
Again, we don't know what it will do to GT9 until we find out exactly what it was.
Yeah, Jim.
Since we've established the precedent of bringing in our New York-based correspondents, I'd like to ask Mr. Schneider for Jules Bergman if the 10-pound ACS thrusters on the Agena would have been enough to set up the roll.
Well, let's see. The combined vehicles at that point in time weighed about, I guess about 12,000 pounds. 12,000 pounds thereabouts, and the 10-pound thruster has a moment arm of about 3.5 feet, and torque equals I alpha. It could have gotten a very small roll rate.
I don't wish to belabor the point, but I'd like to follow on Roy Neal's question that I didn't feel was answered entirely. We've been told we've heard all the tapes, and I have no reason to believe otherwise. But do you honestly think there's anything in these tapes that would warrant you holding it up for this many hours? And if so, I'd like to know what you think this is.
No, obviously. Why we held it up for the hours?